Thanks everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Diane, for putting together this comprehensive review for the new EMA updates for 2021. We will spend the next 15 minutes walking you through the changes and really looking at how SafeMark's Power of Three already accommodates the new guidance, so everyone can feel comfortable as we go into 2021 working with SafeMark's Power of Three. So as we dive into this, let's cover my background and Diane's background. This is the leadership. My name is Clayton Tolley. I'm the president and CEO at Brand Symbol and also co-founder and CEO at SafeMark. A little about me. I've been in the industry since 1993. I worked at Addison Whitney for the first 19 years. For the last 11, I was president and CEO and sold the agency to Syneos and to start Brand Symbol in 2010. So we've been around for about 11 years. Diane Roe-Davis, who's the president of SafeMark, we just finished our annual meeting and our 5th year anniversary, which was on February 1st, 2 days ago. She's the president of SafeMark and put together today's agenda.
Hi there. As president of SafeMark, I get very involved in all the proprietary as well as the non-proprietary naming projects that we do. My background is I'm a pharmacist and I also have a law degree. And I created the methodology called the Power of Three methodology that Clayton mentioned a little bit ago. And we use this for name safety testing for proprietary names that are going for regulatory review by the U.S., FDA, Health Canada, as well as the EMA for Europe. And so this presentation was put together to do some highlights on the 2021 changes that we have to that methodology specifically for Europe.
Thank you, Diane. And I know the agenda for today is to look at that EMA proprietary name evaluation. So what's in the agenda?
So we have 3 main topics that we wanted to go over. We always like to start with the EMA statistics on invented name review. We hope that the audience finds this information helpful. And then with Brexit transition ending December 31st of last year, we need to look forward. We've actually been preparing for the last 6 months on how we're going to update our methodology specifically to address Brexit. And then finally, just in general, some best practices that we have for global name safety testing options to see how European name safety testing compared to the U.S. and Canada, for example, what that will look like moving forward into 2021.
Perfect. And I know the first thing clients ask us when we're talking to them is, what about the EMA rejection rate, right, from the NRG? And I see here you put together a really good information slide on the approvals for 2017 and 2018, the rejections in 2019, and kind of that 2020 TBD. Can you walk us through this?
So one of the aspects that SafeMark does as part of a review of not only our methodology and working with our partners to see what names get submitted and eventually approved and sometimes rejected, what we can learn from that. But we can also learn from the process that the EMA follows, and they release a lot of this information throughout the year from each of their meetings. And so what you have here on the screen is a look at the EMA rejection rates, and we always like to compare year to year. So going back to 2017 to part of 2020, I'm still waiting for the last part of the year's meeting kind of updates. So that's why it's TBD for overall 2020. But it's interesting for the rejection rates of 2017 and 2018 hovering around 45, 46%. And we see overall more names approved than rejected for those years. And then in 2019 to 2020, we actually see a little bit higher rejection rate where I have 48% as of October. We anticipate that that percentage will actually be closer to the 53, 55% for 2020. But overall, we've seen more names rejected than approved for those 2 years. And one of the changes is the transition of the EMA offices from London, Canary Wharf area, to Amsterdam. So one of those things that we're kind of watching as we move into 2021 is whether or not these numbers are going to go up or down. Very interesting to see how they move for 2021.
I know we've all been watching all the things that have happened from the move to the UK to Amsterdam. And we'll always be watching until everything really gets settled down and into place. Now, I know you put together a really closer look at the comparison from 2019 to 2020. I know you and your team, there's so many spreadsheets and formulas you're always working. But what is this telling us when we compare the 2 years?
So one of the things that we're moving towards whenever we do our Power of Three methodology and our name safety testing results is typically we have name candidates that are scored from a low to a high regulatory risk rating. What this is telling us is from the NRG's perspective, basically the decisions that are made through those CHMP meetings, this is the rationale and the number of accepted versus rejected names, and kind of the why. So why are the bulk of the names getting rejected? And as we can see here from this particular chart, it's due to similarity of the invented names. So we've adopted kind of a similar process, not only in the checklist for how the NRG reviews the names, but also when we're looking at kind of at the end of the day of the name safety testing results, can we put our kind of recommendations and rationale for that high to low ratings into these buckets, if you will. So is it based on similarity, the inclusion of an INN stem? These are all criteria that should be standard, but it's interesting to see that the bulk of the deciding kind of factors for whether or not a name will be accepted or rejected still falls into the similarity with other invented names.
Thank you, Diane. That is really good information. Earlier, you mentioned the EMA office moving from London to Amsterdam, and I remember you and I being at the last NRG meeting, kind of the who's who in the naming and safety testing world, where the NRG met in London for the last time a couple of years ago, and we're hoping that by 2022, we're all able to meet again at least once a year. But let's talk a little bit about being prepared for Brexit and what that means for SafeMark and for the industry.
So this slide and the next slide is really put into this presentation to remind us that not only SafeMark's been preparing for Brexit, but EMA has as well. And most of their publications, they mention not only about the move from London to Amsterdam, but also when we're looking at the portfolio of medicines that are typically included for the United Kingdom. So as you may or may not already know, one of the public databases called Article 57 is very much utilized for finding those cited names. Remember, that's still the number one reason why products get rejected is based on that similarity. Well, one of the preparations, and that's what's alluded to on the right side of the screen, is, well, where do we now find these UK products? And if we have the member states, what products are actually marketed that would be part of that similarity or cited name review? So that's one thing that has been in the development for the last 2 to 3 years. And we are now starting to see where maybe at the end of this year, we'll have some databases that are very specific to the UK portfolio of medicines, as well as they mention even Iceland and Norway. So a lot of the member states are looking to include how they have references to those cited products, because once again, similarity is a major key component of the EMA review of invented names. So it's not just Brexit for moving the EMA offices, but it's also from a database perspective, where we find these similar cited name products in the review for each invented name.
Yeah, yet another database. If Article 57 wasn't enough, here we have another one. So let's look a little bit closer at the EMA website for 2020 and talk about how Brexit communicates to industry.
And we put this in here as really a nice to have to kind of understand some of the consequences, if you will, of Brexit. And the EMA website, you may or may not be aware, continually going through updates, which we find very helpful. A lot of their information is very easy to access. But whenever they talk about Brexit, they actually categorize some risks associated with this, and it's the loss of existing staff, loss of UK expertise in the scientific work, as well as delays in just relocating the agency headquarters. So it may not just be the fact that we're seeing higher rejections since the move, maybe a staffing or training issue. There may be other factors, not just fact that we're seeing an increase in rejections due to the relocation of the offices. But It's just interesting that the agency itself put some of these risks into a document for us to be aware of that are currently going on.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that they're giving us as much information as they possibly can. In fact, I'm sure you saw the email from Julie earlier today from the EMA about the NRG communication. So we're always looking and watching to get as much information as we can so we can respond and react to it. So now let's talk about SafeMark's best practices. I know, for the past 5 years, we're always watching the industry. We've had some tremendous success with all the regulatory bodies, but how is SafeMark's best practices really equipped to accommodate all the changes going on throughout the EMA and for the UK?
Well, one of the aspects we had to address head on is that traditionally, at least for the last 5 years at SafeMark, when we consider EMA-based name safety testing, we focus on the big five, and that's UK, Spain, Germany, Italy, France. And this is not new. This is how we clustered and kind of focused a certain number of respondents to represent, and in addition to database searching, which is something unique to SafeMark, and where we look at how many respondents we have representing certain regions, plus our database searches as well. Moving forward into 2021, we actually want to expand the number of regions, primarily because we're seeing a number of kind of vocal rejections in communications by the EMA and specifically the NRG from these countries. These countries also have medication use or medication error reporting in their countries. So these additional countries were selected carefully so that we can now have a larger representation of European countries, not just relying on the big five, and then extracting out UK into its own survey of respondents. And that is primarily because what we do, we ultimately want to help our clients prioritize the names for agency review. So the EMA name safety testing regions you see there on the right side are very specifically selected for an EMA submission document. We will now also offer UK specific or third nation specific. We'll have a quantity of about 30 respondents as either a standalone or in combination with Europe, but sufficient a number of respondents so that we can also do a UK or an MHRA specific submission report.
And talking about reports, I mean, as you have done the comparison between the EMA submission reports and the third nation only reports, what are the differences there?
Yeah, this is just for kind of a recap slide for our global name safety testing options. So now our clients are going to have the ability to focus on Europe as well as third nation or both together. And what's nice is the way that we designed the Power of Three to be flexible. This is no additional cost. This is no additional timing. This is basically simply reacting to what's happening in the world and being able to adapt. And that was the whole purpose of the Power of Three methodology. So we don't have to stop and completely create something new. We just simply adapt what we have. And so this is underlying the differences where we have the same type of data collection surveys being used, and we have the material that we need ultimately to write a submission report for these areas. So the EMA report for Europe, and then the third nation would be specific to the UK or MHRA.
And we know that every regulatory region has different requirements for submission. Here you've broken down the US and Canada. Would you like to give us a quick summary on those?
Yeah, a bulk of our work is done globally. So we'll admittedly have 20 names, sometimes 30, depending on the client's needs, to evaluate those name candidates. And one thing that SafeMark does is we evaluate those names at the end of the day for the agency ultimately that's going to be reviewing those names. And we can, once again, accommodate that with the Power of Three methodology. So for the United States, we've outlined our standard methodology there. You might have caught our webinar a few weeks ago on the changes based on the December 2020 guidance. That is incorporated into our US or FDA-based methodology. And then for Canada, there's a Health Canadian guidance that's pretty strict that we actually offer clients two different options. And the first option is the guideline standard, where basically you evaluate the names in the same study over a period of time, and it comes with a submission report. And then the alternative option 2 there, we call it a modified Canada. And this is really to ultimately get the client what they need for the submissions to Canada authorities, but we break it up into 2 parts. And that's done with a smaller study at first, and that's what's typically done with perhaps U.S. and Europe testing. And then at the end with Part B, we do a little bit larger study, and that's closer to the submission time frame for Canada. So the 2 options really have the same data output, but they're done at different time frames to help accommodate the needs of our clients.
Yeah, I know Canada's been one of those things that since they instituted their guidance, kind of sent the industry reeling for a little bit of time. But if anything, it's made us better and sharper at our game when it comes to safety testing and data collection based on their requirements, not guidance. Now, I know we're wrapping things up, Diane, but I'm really glad you put together these important meeting dates for 2021. Would you like to walk us through this?
Sure. So sometimes the feedback or the questions that we get from our partners is to remind them when the CHMP meeting dates are, and specifically the deadlines for the NRG discussions. And so that's what this slide has. It's really meant to help those who are reviewing this webinar with a little bit of a cheat sheet for 2021, so you don't have to go digging through the website. Once again, the EMA website is very easy to use, so I don't want to come across any negativity there at all, but this will just save you a little bit of time if you need this for 2021.
And in wrapping up, I want to thank you, Diane, for putting this information together. I know we're always talking about this, but there's a lot of people in the industry on the client side. They don't have access, or they don't have internal teams that are doing this, or they might be working with agencies that are not sharing this kind of information. And we feel it's always important to make sure our clients and potential clients are educated. So thanks for putting this together. And we want to thank everyone else for joining us. You know, we'll have more of these coming out. I know we're going to have some information on the FDA guidance on non-proprietary name safety testing, which was in the guidance from December. But again, thanks for joining. And if you have any questions, we want to be available for you. So feel free to reach out to myself. You can see my information in the materials, or Diane. Either one of us will get back to you. And we look forward to seeing you on future presentations.